Before I start, I found something out right before this event, and so I want to dedicate my story to a very special lady who was actually part of my story. I don't mention her at all, but she played a major role in my story. Her name is Kathy Bellucci, and today is her birthday, and she turns 80 today. So I would like to dedicate this story to her. So I know that I am amongst people who love stories as much as I do, but I'm wondering, have you ever loved a story so much that you wanted to be in it and live it and be friends with the characters? Okay, good. I see a couple of head nods. Like the people that dress up for Star Trek and Star Wars conventions, and they go to the convention all dressed up because they're living their story. Well, I was fortunate enough to be born into just such a story because my parents were Spanish literature professors. And my father, in particular, studied the works of a man named Miguel de Cervantes. And Cervantes is well known for a very famous work that's often considered to be the first modern novel. And it's a story about a crazy old man who reads so many books about knights and chivalry that he decides to become a knight himself. And he gets himself some armor and a horse and a squire, and he goes out into the world to fight evil and do good works. So by now, hopefully some of you recognize this as the story of Don Quixote de la Mancha and his faithful squire Sancho. So this is a story that I was born into. And in fact, I was Sancho's daughter because my father's friends all called him Sancho. His middle name was Sanchez, and he spent his career following Don Quixote. So I was Sancho's daughter. And when I was 5 years old, my father and his graduate student conceived the strangest project ever imagined. And they flew their families to Spain and piled us into a rental station wagon, and we drove through the brown rolling hills of La Mancha, following the path of Don Quixote and Sancho. Now, the station wagon was the mechanical equivalent of Don Quixote's horse, obstinate and broken down, and that thing stalled every couple of miles. And every time it stalled, the three youngest of us, sitting in the way back, facing backwards. Remember those station wagons where you face backwards? Had front row seats to the epic drama of our parents, their red puffy faces right in front of ours, pushing that car back to life. And the helter-skelter as they ran to get back in before the thing could stall again. And in this way, we started and stopped, and started and stopped, and started and stopped down that dusty road. And the whole time, my father was spinning stories about encounters with sorcerers and battles with ogres and giants and rescuing fair maidens. And soon we began to see that arid landscape, not as it was, but as it ought to be. Well, after a time, we came to an inn, an ancient inn, an inn that had been there since the Middle Ages. And this was the very inn where Don Quixote was said to have been knighted by the innkeeper. And we spent the night at this inn. And I remember thick whitewashed walls and thatched roofs and narrow dirt pathways between the buildings. And we hadn't been there very long when the town bell began to ring. And in those towns, that's a really, really bad thing. That means crisis, emergency, danger. And all the townspeople were running towards the center of town, shouting, "Que pasa? Que pasa?" And my father's graduate student, Lou, he and his wife were running, shouting, "David, David," because they knew their teenage son was the one who was ringing that bell. So, much like Don Quixote and Sancho, we were asked to leave at morning light. Well, we had lots of great adventures on that trip. But a couple of years after that, my father passed away, and we lost touch with Don Quixote. I mean, we'd see him from time to time in plays and ballets and movies, but it wasn't the same. We were no longer part of the story. But still, anytime Don Quixote came to town, I raced to see him. And a couple of years ago, he came to a local community group, the Sterling Playmakers, did a production of Man of La Mancha. And I was so excited. Don Quixote is in my hometown. And so I called on my friends and we made all the plans to go see the show. But then I woke up one morning and I thought, well, I don't want to just see this show. I want to be in it. I want to be part of this story again. The only problem was I have no acting experience at all, like except for the obligatory elementary school skits. But other than that, no acting experience. I don't sing, I don't dance. But I did what Don Quixote would do, and I plunged boldly forward into that audition, and I got a part. I got a part as a servant in the very inn that I had been at when I was 5 years old. And so there I was, standing next to Aldonza, who was Don Quixote's beloved Dulcinea, serving the muleteers and laughing at the antics of Don Quixote and Sancho. And for 2 glorious months, I got to spend every day with Don Quixote and Dulcinea and Sancho. And I was living that story again. I was back in the story. When it came time to build the sets, my husband came to help. And the first thing I did was I dragged him over to where Don Quixote was nailing some pieces of wood together. And I said, Brian, this is Don Quixote. And the 2 men started talking about nail guns and glue and paint and stuff like that. I stood back and I smiled because now my husband was part of the story too. But the best day ever was the morning I woke up and I went downstairs like I usually do and I checked my phone and I have a Facebook friend request from Don Quixote himself. I squealed like a tween at a BTS concert. It was glorious. And through all those rehearsals and performances, I continued that journey that I had started when I was 5 years old, following the path of Don Quixote and Sancho. And I could hear my father's voice telling those tales and spinning those stories. There's a scene at the end of the show when the story is almost over and Cervantes has stepped out of his role as Don Quixote. He's been entertaining all of us prisoners. And the Inquisition is leading him away. And we all watch with such sadness to see him go because our story is going with him. But Dulcinea stands up. And she starts to sing the impossible dream. And one by one, our voices join with hers. And we step forward into the light and we belt that song out to the audience. And then the curtain closes. So after a couple weekends of performances, the show closed and we all went our separate ways. But here's the thing. I know where Don Quixote lives now, just down the road in Ashburn. And Dulcinea and Sancho, they live close by too. And we're all still friends on Facebook, and I see their stories unfolding. But more importantly, it turns out that they are the type of people who will heed a crazy call to adventure to come and support a first-time storyteller. And so tonight, I would like to thank the beautiful Dulcinea, the faithful Sancho, and the incomparable Don Quixote for continuing my story. Thank you.